Thank you for joining us for this exciting new episode of Chronic Pain Rewired. And this is a special episode. I have two guests for the first time, and this will be a panel discussion talking about what we did about a week and a half ago, which was hosting the first Posturedelic therapy training retreat. And my two guests are Olivia Tooley and Marin Campbell. Olivia she's a posture therapist like me. She also has a background in physical therapy. Marin has extensive background in physical therapy, myofascial release, dry needling, some other stuff. I'll let them introduce themselves in more detail in just a moment. The big thing that you should take away from what you'll hear about in this episode is a in-depth discussion of kind of a blow-by-blow series of events of this training retreat, the people involved, of course, not names or anything like that, but the types of things we observed, what we think went well, what we think we could do better. Let's get into it. So, Olivia, how about you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Olivia. Have been a postural therapist for about 5 years now. I started in 2019. I originally went to Penn State University, graduated in 2015 with focuses to go into physical therapy. And while I had some extensive internships and work hours in that type of platform, I eventually started to gravitate more towards the yoga aspect of it. So I am also a registered yoga instructor. I really gravitated towards that because it is focusing on the entire body and how it moves. And eventually then I found postural therapy, and kind of the rest is history. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I have my own business doing postural therapy now.
Excellent. And Marin, would you like to share a little bit about yourself as well, your background?
Sure, thank you. So I'm a physical therapist. I've been a PT for 10 years. I have a private practice here in Denver where I focus on having a really holistic practice that takes into account different dimensions of healing. And so with that, I'm also a yoga teacher. So I incorporate a lot of mind-body techniques, breath work, also a certified breath training instructor through Oxygen Advantage. So I incorporate a lot of non-traditional PT or non-traditional to PT modalities like breath and yoga, as well as, like you mentioned before, dry needling, myofascial release, and some more of the traditional PT modalities. So really thinking about not chasing after symptoms, but looking at the whole person and how best to help somebody heal from a multifactorial perspective. Because, as I've gone through my own chronic pain journey and working with lots of people in chronic pain, it's never one thing. And the longer it goes on, the more it starts wrapping different aspects of your life into it and becomes this kind of like big monster. So you can't really just go in and be like, oh, let me stretch your shoulder because your shoulder hurts, or massage your back, or give you a couple exercises. So it becomes like this more encompassing thing, everything from what I already mentioned to like mindset and talking to people about their beliefs around the pain and things like that. And in that regard, I also do a lot of referring out to other professionals because I can't do it all. And so I work a lot with like trauma therapists and nutritionists, and run a holistic health and wellness network here in Denver. So lots of great practitioners to support the work that I do as well. So excited.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, there's one of two ways we could go right now. I want to get your guys' impression of what you were feeling, what you were thinking kind of going into the retreat. But I also want to let the audience know what the structure of the retreat was. But I think let's hear about what you guys were thinking and feeling beforehand.
Yeah. I was a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. I didn't fully, while I knew the kind of the rough itinerary of what was going to happen there, it was my first mushroom trip too, what we did on Friday. And so I was kind of gung-ho about it, but also just thinking the best thing possible is going to happen out of it. But yeah, I just really honestly didn't know what to expect from a personal growth perspective,
Yeah, that was your first time with mushrooms, but you have plenty of experience with other psychedelics and other medicines,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Lots.
Marin, how are you feeling going in?
Yeah, I think I was really just interested and feeling kind of curious about how, I've read the book and feel like I understand postural therapy, the way that you guys apply it, because I've had a little experience with that prior to meeting you. And then plenty of experience with psychedelics and mushrooms in particular, and my own exploration of using mushrooms in a therapeutic context. But I was super curious on like what this was going to look like in the real world, how you were going to, just from a logistics perspective or like an operations perspective, like run, something like this where you are being a little more intentional and organized about what is happening during a trip.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
curiosity.
think as we'll discuss, I think we did have a few speed bumps in that area. But I was one of the things I really wanted this retreat to be was a safe place to make small mistakes, right? And to let people explore what happens at various doses and things like that. So yeah, we'll get into some of that later. So to give the audience an idea of what we did, this retreat lasted, I guess you could technically consider it starting on a Thursday night and going through to Sunday evening. On Thursday night, I facilitated a changa ceremony, which is DMT with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So it's like smokable ayahuasca. I facilitated a ceremony for Marin and for another participant who we will not name. And then on Olivia and Marin both had a session facilitated by me, as well as a co-facilitator who was there with me, my friend and colleague Kevin Singleton, who is helping us actually develop some exciting posturedelic breath work. But then on Saturday, I was a participant. Olivia and Marin facilitated posturedelic ceremonies, not just for me, but for 3 other people. And then on Sunday, those same 3 people went under, and I was then observing Olivia and Marin facilitating on that day. So I actually had probably one of the easiest jobs this weekend, thankfully. So do you guys feel like that was a pretty good explanation of what we did?
Yeah, it was like a round robin facilitating and
Yeah, kind of a round robin. So that was the format for the weekend. So I guess we should start with Thursday night. Marin, how did Thursday night go for you?
Yeah, so I had never done DMT before, so this was a new experience for me. So I mean, I would say I wasn't hesitant or fearful, but it was like very curious, like what is about to happen, and definitely felt like I was in a nice container for that, because the other participant who was there that evening is someone I'm very familiar and comfortable with, and have spent time in this psychedelic space with. So. And it was just lovely being outside and incorporating what was happening. There was like a storm building and some like wind happening. I mean, it just felt very kind of auspicious or something to be out there in that energy. And so I didn't really have a lot of preconceptions about what it was going to feel like. I would say it was very heavy on the visuals.
That's one way to describe it.
In a very kind of in the hell is happening right now. But as with the mushroom ceremonies that weekend, we entered it with some breath or some intention, just like the creation of a little container, which felt really nice. So I just felt really held in that space, and it felt very exploratory. Yeah, it felt like I was discovering something new. And I dropped in after that like heavy visual initial several minutes. I dropped into like a really nice body high, like very somatically aware, very comfortable. Yeah, it was interesting.
Do you think you had like a breakthrough experience, a DMT breakthrough experience, or do you think it was kind of sub breakthrough?
Yeah, from what I've heard, because I don't know, I think I was sub. I think it was sub. I think I didn't really know how far to go with it. And so I kind of ended up stopping somewhere short of like being fully dosed, I guess. So
Right.
without knowing the alternative, yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. I think that DMT is more somatic at those lower doses. When you're not like fully in another reality every time you close your you can, wow, big shocker. be more present to feel your body, right? So yeah, we're the. Do you think that you did that in the static back position? Do you think that had any effect on your ceremony, or do you think that was not? Do you think that was like a minor factor?
I find that position, the static back, which is 90 on my back, 90 degrees of hip flexion and knee flexion, I find that to be a very comfortable position. It feels very aligning for me and my body. A lot of my chronic pain has been in my back and hips. And so it feels really, I want to say comforting, but it's almost more like healing or something to be in that position. And so
it's a very receptive pose.
It is. Yeah, it is. And maybe when we talk more about my ceremony on Friday, we can, like, in terms of like energetic positions as relating to physical positions, there was certainly some meaning there. But yeah, I think it was a great position. I would choose that position again in terms of just like feeling nice and lined up and supported.
Okay, cool. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about for Thursday night?
Not maybe just to say, I think that ceremony definitely had an impact on my mushroom ceremony Friday.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. And I'm very, now that it's been, day shy of 2 weeks since that ceremony, and last time I spoke to you, I think it was about a week ago. So I'm very curious to see what's happened in the meantime. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, let's talk about Olivia's ceremony on Friday. So on Friday, I facilitated again for Olivia and Marin. This was mushrooms this time, not DMT. And if I remember correctly, you each did 2 grams of Golden Teacher and 1 gram of Louis Vuitton. And that's the ratio, the mix we stuck with all weekend for most of the participants. And yeah, how was that for you, Olivia?
Yeah, it was just honestly like a wow factor that I went through. Like I said, never took mushrooms before, but I had previous experience with other psychedelics and things like that. And it's like, I'll just trust John, and I'm just gonna like dose me whatever you want. He's like, I'm gonna do 3 grams. I'm like, great, let's do it. And then so we took the mushrooms, and then we did some of the breath work with Kevin. And even on that second, there was 3 rounds, and on that second round, I was like, I'm already like levitating at this point. It was an amazing experience for me. I do like it more than other psychedelics. I would definitely say that. And so there was a point though, because during our ceremony, we've written down dynamic exercises and then static exercises. There was one point though where I was like, if I do anything dynamic, I think I'll like fall over. I have to stay static to like reground myself. And I would definitely say the exercises that I was doing during the trip definitely helped ground me, because there was one point where I was like, I don't know if my eyes are open or if they're closed, because I was just, the visuals were so intense. Like, I guess it doesn't even really matter because they were all the same. But it was really interesting though, diving into like certain exercises where I could like almost like really like hone in and focus on feeling what I'm feeling, and like feeling and interpreting like the restrictions that I had in my body. Because sometimes like when I had restrictions in my body doing certain exercises, like certain internal things would happen, in the sense of like just like these like thoughts that would kind of protrude just because of that. And then it was really cool to just be able to also dive into that space as well, because I've never really done psychedelics at all in a sense where it is in a controlled environment. Like there's always so much external stimulus of like festivals, music, TV, and it really helped me go internal. And then the one other major thing that I would note on my experience is when we did the tower. So I did supine progressive double pedal, which both of my feet are up in the tower. John helped me lower down because I don't think I could have done that on my own. There was a point where I was lying down and like my hands were just below my belly button. And a week beforehand, I had met with an integrative reflex person who said that my bonding reflex is like totally out of whack. So for like background things,
Can you say go into a little bit of bonding reflex is?
Yeah, so bonding reflex has a lot to do. So it's like has a lot to do with creating relationships with people or having trust with people. And it does show up in pretty much my everyday life. I told my husband that, and he's like, yeah, you definitely have issues with that. I'm like, hey. For some background, like I have been through some like sexual trauma with family. I was adopted too. So I feel like there's just like a lot of stuff in there that like restricts me from creating relationships and strong bonds with people. And so, the psoas muscle, which the tower works on, right? From a yogic standpoint, is the muscle of your soul. And I feel like too, for women especially, hold a lot of trauma there. But my hands were like right below my belly button. And at one point I just started crying. And I couldn't even tell why in my mental space. Like I feel like I mentally processed it a long time ago, but it was still stuck in my body. And the only thing that I can relate that to is, holding like the womb area, kind of like in that like sacred area down there, and then yeah, once I could kind of like think about it, like once I was coming out of the trip, like it definitely made sense that that's what that was, I think. And it was honestly like coming out of that trip and like this whole past week, I've just been so much more in my heart center than I have ever been. And it is like truly such an amazing feeling to not just be up here in my thinking mind and in my ego all the time.
What has that looked like translating into your personal life, if you're comfortable sharing?
Absolutely. I mean, I already even think that like I just come from more of like an open, loving space. Like I can even tell that like my relationship with my husband is so different. Like even I can feel and see that like he's changing because of that. And that's like helping our relationship so much. It's so powerful. Like I don't know, and it's just I'm not coming from more of like that judgmental or that thinking mind type of ordeal. Like I can actually like hear people and like feel people and just let them be as they are. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about your ceremony from Friday?
No, I'll probably comment once Marin tells her experience.
Yeah. So your experience was one way.
Mm-hmm.
Marin's experience was a different way. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin, really. I think, so I know I'm kind of a lightweight, and so we had chosen like a 3. Actually, I went down to 2.5 grams. So we had started with
right,
3, and then I kind of was like, let me drop it down a little in the interest of not being like fully incapacitated. And so, so it was 2.5,
And one quick note here. One place where we can certainly improve is that I was under the impression that you had gone down to 2, so I thought you were on 2 grams because I gave you the dose, and then you're like, yeah, you thought about it, you're like, no, I'm going to go down, and yeah, so I that was 100% my bad, but that is someplace where I can improve is making sure that it's very clear communication when the doses are finally decided.
Yeah, and also, erring on the side of smaller, because the nature of my experience was very deep and profound, and I was also a little too deep to really engage with the exercises as much as I had intended and kind of wanted to. However, I mean, it still ended up being a very incredible experience, and I would say the exercises and positions were like a big part of that. But also, yeah, I was fully under, and I remember initially, trying to stay on track with the kind of the exercises that I had chosen that were meaningful to me and my body. And then at a certain point, as I was rising toward the peak, I was just really struggling to stay on track and like kept losing track of what I was doing. And then at a certain point, and I really appreciated you giving me the space to just kind of be where I needed to be. And once I was off track, kind of just letting me go where I needed to go. So,
yeah, I'll interject real quick right there. Part of being a wise facilitator, like you go in with intentions, with a plan, that's all great. But at the end of the day, the mushrooms are going to give us what we need, not what we want. And so when you start getting really strong signals like, hey, that plan was shit, we're going this way, just go with it. Go with the flow.
And I think that, a lot of stuff came up for me without going super deep.
There's no need to go like into the personal details. Unless that would be healing for you, then you're welcome to. But
yeah, I think What showed up for me a lot was some physical trauma and, around males. It was interesting for me. I'd never been facilitated by a male before, and there were two of you present. And while you held incredible space and were very kind and kind of like unobtrusive, and actually really appreciated the energy that you both showed up with, it was like I knew you were there, but it wasn't intruding upon my experience, which I really appreciated. I think the presence of two strong male energies was, I don't know if it like gave something in me permission to let something come up, or if it just like subconscious of something or what, but I just went deep into this like very male oriented trauma response. And it like played out pretty intensely. There were like several moments actually where I was like checking on Olivia because I knew I was taking up a lot of space with like sound. I was crying a lot. I was moving around. I was like vocalizing, and kind of like going back to previous experiences. And every now and then I'd be like, Olivia, are you okay? Like, like, how are you doing over there? Because she was having this very internal, but also quiet experience. And what I would say is that, after kind of being in the peak of just letting the mushrooms kind of take me where they were going to take me, we kind of revisited like certain static positions. And so we went into like supine groin, which is, one leg propped up at 90-90 and the other leg extended on the floor. So it opens up the front of the hip that's on the floor. And I think we even moved that leg into a little bit of abduction. So it was like open away from my midline. And that was a very, like we were talking about with the DMT, it's like a very receptive / vulnerable position. And to be able to be supported in that position, right? By the floor, by the block, but also energetically supported by the container of you and Kevin, and then Olivia having her experience adjacent to me. I just felt myself let go on a level that felt very deep and energetic and like beyond just the physical feeling of letting my muscles relax. So it was, I'm glad that was part of the experience and that I wasn't just laying on the floor in whatever position. I spent a lot of time in child's pose. In the fetal position, I was like wrapped in all these blankets, like kind of trying to get in as much of a little cave ball as possible. I don't think I could have possibly gotten smaller at certain points, actually. And that was like it felt like such a protective response, to like what was coming up for me, but also to be able to like counterpoint that with being in a more open position, but still feeling really supported. And I think I still had blankets on me. So maybe that compression of the blankets was feeling really soothing to my nervous system as well. But yeah, it was definitely a release. And it seemed like it kind of united like mind and body because of the position.
Right. Now, there was one interesting point before, like when your experience started getting really, when I could tell that it was starting to get difficult, but you weren't quite at that point of ready to just like, like let go and start like giving yourself permission, like you talked about. You were under a whole bunch of blankets and you had like a little hole this big to like breathe out of. I got one of the essential oils that we had marked on your sheet for like helping you wanting to cry, because I was watching you there and I was hearing all these like just really painful sounds, like painful to listen to. It's like, oh god, she's like really going through it. But I could tell you needed to cry, but you just weren't right there. And I put like a little bit, like a drop of that on one of the scent strips, and I just like placed it right outside your little breathing hole. And a few seconds after that is when you finally just like, and I thought that was really interesting. Well, I can't like prove that this introducing the smell, like I doubt you even realized that happened, right? Like, I am curious as to whether like interrupting the default mode network for just a second with something novel like that may have finally got the ego to just kind of give up for a second, you know. I don't know, but that was a rose attar that I used for that, and that was one of the things that I was looking at this retreat was experimenting with some of this aromatherapy stuff. We got overwhelmed with the retreat portion. We didn't get too much into the aromatherapy stuff, but I did have a panel discussion with Kevin and with Florian, the man who does these aromatherapies, and so that will be another podcast that will be up after this one. So keep an eye out for that one if you're listening. When we got into the supine groin pose with Umarin, you said something like you'd finally been quiet for, not finally as in like, oh god, but you had been going through this for such a long time, you know, and you had reached a point where there were still a few more waves that came after that, but you're at a much more, you had more agency over your experience at this point, I feel like. At least that's was my observation. And you started talking about all the implications for women with pelvic floor and these types of things. Do you have, I know we touched on some, but do you have more that you'd like to talk about with that? Or you too, Olivia, if you have things to chime in there, because I saw you nodding your head too.
Yeah.
I just remember hearing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in Olivia's like thoughts too, and just regarding yoga and stuff like that. But I know that, you know, when I'm working on people, especially doing really grounding work that involves creating a lot of safety for people, so they're on the table, you're, you know, doing things to help down regulate their nervous system. Maybe it's like breath work or just some hands-on myofascial techniques that are very you know, people drop into their body in a way that allows energetic things to come up, traumas that are, we say, stuck in the body, right? So I think certain positions can also, you know, bring things up because the body remembers being in certain positions during moments of trauma. And so which is why a lot of times, you know, there's like very triggering things about like going into certain positions, and people tend to avoid them for that reason. But if you can create a safe space and kind of like stepwise bring someone into that, you can potentially allow, I think, that position to be explored in a way where the person is held and safe. And so when I was, like you said, I was kind of coming down from the peak of it, and I was a little more aware. And I was in the supine groin with one leg up and one leg down, especially with my leg abducted, right? So like, you know, that's a very vulnerable position for women, especially women who have experienced sexual trauma. It feels scary, frankly. It feels very vulnerable. And like actually just like somatically felt a wave go through me just as I said that. And so to be able to be in that place and like drop in and feel safe and kind of let go of some of that protective tension that seems like it's always there. And then from a purely physical standpoint, right? Like if that's where a lot of your pain is, and like I've had injuries, I've had surgery to my hip, you know, to be able to like let that guard down, so to speak, it allowed some energy to move through there too. And so I think at that moment I was very like, wow, this is profound for people who do a lot of holding around the pelvic area, which is like so many people, men and women. I mean, I've worked with men who have had trauma to that area through falls, car accidents, also sexual trauma. And so, you know, the pelvic floor, I'm not a pelvic floor specialist, but it is potent, you know, area of the body for holding onto emotions. And it's like, I mean, it's like our root. It's like the root chakra. It's the core of us. And, you know, in yoga, there's a lot of like breath techniques and mula bandha and like all these things you can do to kind of focus energy in that area and to promote like energy flow through that area. So being in certain positions, I'm thinking of like Supta Baddha Konasana, like where you're laying on your back with your knees bent and your feet together, like kind of like the butterfly position with your knees open. It's a very vulnerable position. Oftentimes it's like in restorative yoga where you support yourself with lots of props so that you're able to like be in that position, but also be held. And it felt kind of like that, I guess, like a very supported position. So it made me think about all the applications for people who hold there, which is like a lot of people, even if they don't have
Mhm.
explicit like sexual trauma, there's still a lot that goes on in that area of the body. Also, our culture, it's like it's taboo. Like we don't talk about it. Nobody ever touches it. You know,
Mhm.
it's like yeah, there's so much there. So Olivia, I'd be interested too in just like your yoga perspective and all that as well. Like, just what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely like just piggybacking off of what you said about just like the safe environment is so big. And what I found through working with whether even it being like posture clients or even to like with yoga clients, it's really their choice of like if they really want to go that far, right? And there's never a time really where when those things happen where some people kind of like back away from certain hip opening things or just being in more of that like vulnerable place, like men and women really. It can elicit like a trauma response or an emotional release or something like that too. And I just I when that happens though, I kind of just ask them like, is there a reason why? And like not even asking like what the reason is why, but like in the sense of just being like, do you know why? And
Mhm.
like, do you want to go through that? Like, is that a good time for you to do that? If it's not, then it's okay. But just helping to like modify that space in a sense where, you are supported by certain locks, bolsters, things like that. So it's not so vulnerable for them at that moment in time. It does happen like a lot, really, which is kind of like, I think is like fascinating because I definitely like poking the bear, like when it comes to like my own healing. And I just like to dig and dig and dig. But some people aren't ready for that, and that's totally fine, or just baby steps, right? But even too, like the fascinating thing about posture therapy too is like people can get emotional releases from like any parts of their body, like
Mhm.
regardless if that's like an injured place or not. And I just find that also super fascinating and more telling about that person and possibly maybe what they've been through too.
So, Marin, what have been some of your kind of takeaways from your ceremonies into your everyday life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll like going from Friday, so going from Thursday night to Friday, which I do think, I've had many mushroom experiences without the DMT, and I do think that that like deepened the experience. And I don't, it's hard to quantify or like say how,
Yes,
but
it is.
yeah, I mean, just like a synergistic, it really felt like a synergistic effect of the medicines like working together to like create an openness or a portal or something where I could access. But then to go from those 2 days of a personal experience to Saturday facilitating you and the others, and then Sunday co facilitating with you. Also, to see, like, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like the difference between Saturday and Sunday in terms of like where everybody was pretty cool to witness. But I think it felt really good to have a personal experience before facilitating, just because it like opens you up, but also you feel connected to where people are. Energetically, you kind of feel like you're still in that afterglow window, and so you're kind of
Mhm.
with them in a sense, even though you're lucid again and very in control.
Yeah, I feel it's easier for me to empathize if I have a ceremony that in the few days afterwards, I'm definitely more empathetic and more or maybe more empathic. Maybe more than empathetic, more empathic is a better word.
Yeah, the connection feels pretty strong,
Hmm.
and even though you're not experiencing what they are, you're kind of like with them, you feel like you're
Hmm.
like with them.
Yeah,
And
I have a better capacity to try to imagine what they're going through.
yeah, yeah. And I think it put me, my takeaways, I guess, would be I felt very spacious and like grounded, which is not always the case for me, kind of all over the place and scattered. And I have a million things on my mind always. And I felt like even right after, I don't know if you remember this moment, I remember very vividly because we were sitting, it was like the four of us, and we were sitting on the couches. I was on the couch, Liv was on the couch. And we were kind of talking about, we just like launched right into like,
Yeah, we
The
did
analytics.
yeah we that was probably not the wisest move. We were just like
we're
all
pretty
kind of
brief.
hot to
Like,
trot. I think
yeah,
I
like,
couldn't
yeah.
talk.
but what was interesting is I like specifically remember just kind of being very calm. I felt so calm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
was able to like maybe my experience, which I think was different from like your experience of the, you
Mm-hmm.
know, of what had happened, and like maybe to make some points of like things we could have done better on. Like I felt like we could have been much better at creating a container. We kind of all jumped into it like, oh, we're here to train. And it was me and Olivia and you and Kevin. And we were just like, yeah, let's do this. And we didn't really intentionally set a container like we did for the rest of the weekend for the other participants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for that reason, we kind of accelerated in and then we like accelerated out. And all of a sudden, we were in like debriefing mode about like logistics and stuff. And it was a little jarring.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt a little unsupported in terms of like easing out of, but because of the space I was in, I was like feeling so chill. I was like, I could say anything right now. Not in a disrespectful way, but just in a like,
No,
this is
yeah.
my truth and this is my
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I'm just here to say it and share it with the intention that we're all here to like create, you know, help co create and facilitate you in creating something amazing and beautiful. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
it was a cool space to be in.
Yeah,
And
that was
like,
a great conversation. While I agree our timing on the conversation was probably not optimal, it was still a great conversation.
yeah, and maybe, you know, I mean, we learned and maybe it was uncomfortable and I kept making eye contact with Olivia. Like you were just kind of like, I think it felt like you were like agreeing with what I was saying, but like weren't really vocalizing yourself. So I was kind of like, I think I'm speaking for both of us with some of this, but
You were for sure. I just like I was not in a place to talk. It would have came out all backwards probably.
no, I will say, I think that like, just to finish the original question of like the takeaways into the week and a half that it's been is just feeling really grounded, relatively speaking, and feeling like grounded in my physical body. You know, like I've been working through some injuries. I'm kind of at the tail end of a couple injuries, and I felt really good in my body the past couple weeks. Like I've been able to, I started playing tennis recently, which is like not something that I've really done. And I had a foot injury. And so everyone's like, oh, tennis, do you think that's a great idea? Like you're like running back and forth. And I hadn't run at all. And I'm super competitive. So I'm like, yeah, like chasing these balls that I probably should just be letting go. But I'm, you know, my body's just been like, okay, yeah, let's do that. Like we can hang with this. And so that's felt really, I feel really like grounded in myself physically, which is a great feeling.
That's good.
Mm.
So, Saturday, how did that go for you guys?
I think it went great. Definitely more seamless because I think just learning from Friday, kind of like working together because you were going under John, so like me and Marin were just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
coming together and thinking of like, okay, like this is what it was for us, and then what would we want to change, or what do we want to keep, and all of those types of things. Um, Speaking to the participant that I had brought, she thought that was like a fairly seamless thing on Saturday, which I was very happy about. And yeah, Saturday, I feel like everyone was super excited, and I actually love that like all of the participants kind of like were on the same like wavelength together. They were all super supportive
Mm-hmm.
of one another, hearing them out about things and kind of just helping and creating like this like little community that we had for
Mm-hmm.
the weekend was great.
Yeah. Before we go deeper into Saturday, let me just quickly explain the reasoning. As if you're listening, you might be thinking it's kind of weird that like I just gave them one day of training and then took some mushrooms and said, "Here, go for it." But the reason, and Livia kind of she touched on this a bit. We were being very intentional about giving. Or I want to be very intentional about giving Olivia and Marin the space to be creative with what they had learned from the day before. And one of the things that I'm very anxious to do is to get new perspectives on posturedelic therapy. Up to now, it's pretty much just been living in one brain, and one brain always has biases, always has ignorance, always has an inability to know things and see things from more than one perspective, at least at one time. So I wanted to show them kind of how I do it and then give them a space, one, to make mistakes, like we talked about earlier, to figure out what they did well, what they kind of had natural talent for, what they had natural not as much talent for, right? And then we were able to discuss that on Saturday evening and on Sunday morning, and then we were able to address those going into Sunday. So it actually worked out really well. That was our reasoning behind it. I just wanted to explain that to the audience. When we got into, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what we did the morning before? Or maybe Marin, you could talk a little about what we did in the morning before we ingested, before we actually started the ceremony.
Yeah, so coming out of Friday, where we had that conversation afterwards about like, okay, I think it would be great if we really focus on like creating that container and setting some very clear intentions. And, I mean, I'm a physical therapist. I touch people for a living. And so one thing that didn't come up on Friday, but was very relevant to like moving forward with other participants was, having a touch contract and having a touch agreement that was agreed upon before anybody ingested any substances. It's, what do you feel comfortable with? Does anyone not want to be touched at all? Just being very clear on that, before going in, and as well as, identifying intentions that each individual would go into the ceremony with, and yeah, just touching base with everyone before they went under too, kind of checking in. What do people want to share? And so Olivia kind of, I think, like organized us around the table, and we walked through things like sharing intentions, which was optional for everyone, but I think everyone chose to share. And then talking about touch and talking about, how the day was going to proceed. Like, okay, we're going to identify intentions. We're going to make, everyone's going to take care of their personal needs. And we're going to come back together and do breath practice together to kind of segue into the ceremony space. And
we filled out charts that everyone could plan, like during each part of the ceremony. I'm interested in doing, or potentially interested in doing, these kinds of exercises. And
everyone had been doing the exercises at home and was familiar. And so then before, like you said, when we were together, and this was something that Olivia and I did too, but kind of going through the little chart and picking the exercises that felt most relevant and supportive to our bodies, and having like almost like a little blueprint or game plan that you guys or whoever was facilitating could then look at and help keep someone on track with.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Olivia, what stood out for you about facilitating on Saturday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was, when do you let them, this is probably the wrong saying for it, but like, when do you let them like go off the rails? Like, at what point, this was like the hardest for me, is like, at what point, like, how much do I interfere with your experience or try to help you through that experience through doing posture work, when they're just like not in the space to do that at that moment in time? I think that was probably the hardest.
There more, like one of the participants at one point got very interested in a socket that was in the floor, and
she would not let that thing go. Yeah, you know what I mean? So it was kind of like, I would help, like, well, maybe try to do this, but then, when they say no, at that point, like, like, what do I do then? Like, how am I going to be the most supportive for that person when that is just something that is just not going to show up for them right now?
And what were your takeaways with how to approach that situation?
Yeah. So just different ways of wording things, right? Like, it's not necessarily like, okay, we should be doing this now, or coming from more of like a curiosity state of like, well, what if we tried this? Or what if we tried this position? Or how do you think that this would feel? To kind of like just facilitate them literally into like, okay, maybe like that is something I want to try, and being more open-minded and not so closed off in the way that I talk to them.
Right. They have an opportunity to make their own decisions.
Yes.
Rather than just being nagged into following a plan like a kindergartner. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Marin, what was your big takeaway from Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what Olivia just said, that reminded me a lot of like trauma-informed language, right? And trauma-informed care, which is like very inviting language, asking questions like, how would this feel? Inviting curiosity in them, right? Like, how would it feel to try this position out? Or And that way they still have agency and choice and they're in control. However, you're planting seeds, like seeds that they had chosen previously, right? Like these were the exercises that were meaningful to them. And so you're just kind of like, hey, remember this, and then they get to be like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good, that sounds like something I want to explore right now. Or they can elect to kind of go inward and that happened with me on Friday, right, where it was like a couple times I chose the position and like, yeah, let's try that out, and a couple times I was like, no, I am so far into wherever I am right now. I was it possible to pull myself out? Yes, but it felt more compelling to stay where I was. So yeah, I would say the takeaway similar, right? Just kind of observing what it was like for people to be in that space. And then in my previous experience facilitating, it had been different in terms of it was a much more like, yep, the mushrooms led the way. There was no intention of being in different positions or trying different things out. It was much more like, you're laying in the nest with the eye mask and the headphones. As a facilitator, I'm there to create a safe space and provide harm reduction and just be
You're making
supportive.
sure they don't hurt themselves or hurt
Right.
someone else or
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
something reckless, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it was quite a counterpoint to be more like engaged with someone, even if it was in the form of a question, but just kind of like reminding them of the postural aspect,
Mm-hmm.
the physical aspect.
I had a question and then it just left my mind. What was I think this was it. What if it was there like a shocking part of Saturday, like something you didn't expect at all that happened?
I'm trying to think of Saturday versus Sunday.
Yeah, the days did kind of. It's amazing how much those 3 days kind of got mixed up in my mind at points.
I think I was surprised that people didn't go deeper. And maybe it was because the doses were smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I think the participants, it was maybe a new experience and people were feeling a little more kind of protective. Like, I don't know if I want to go fully in or fully
Mm-hmm.
expose myself or open up to the experience. But it was almost like after the first day, then the second day, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, we can go deep.
Yeah, I felt there was definitely some guarding going on that first day, and that's completely normal. Especially one of the participants, she knew absolutely nobody else there. Like every other person there knew at least one person there,
Mhm.
and yeah, one of the like I thought what she did was amazing. Like that must have been very difficult to do. But yeah, I definitely felt just that kind of ambiance from Saturday. A little bit more guarding, a little more closed. People weren't quite ready to surrender to the experience yet.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I have anything else. I can talk about my experience very briefly. I don't want to take a lot of time to that. So I took a very low dose because I was essentially like a backup for Olivia and Marin. I took 0.75 grams. So by the time all the other participants were like hitting their peak, I was already like coming out of mine. And I did lots of like shoulder and scapular work and some work on my hips as well. I was just kind of trying to lead by example, and I just kept my head down and did my stuff. One thing I have noticed, so actually I don't want to go into everything with my groin and stuff. My big integration work coming out of this has been breath work. So Kevin Singleton, the other facilitator, he unfortunately had the family thing come up like a few minutes before we started this panel, so he wasn't able to attend. But he's in my opinion, the best breathwork coach I've ever met, best breathwork expert I've ever met. And I was super excited to finally spend a big chunk of time with Kevin because my big integration has been incorporating breath work, and I have been noticing in interactions between as I improve my breath work, musculature in my lower spine, and with rotation in my lower spine as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Very big on the breathwork stuff. Very big on incorporating that into my routine, and that is where as the audience you're going to be seeing more of that into the content in the near future within the next few months. So that's my takeaway from Saturday. So on Sunday had the same three participants One of the participants did a very, very low dose, the same type of dose that I had done the day before. And the two others did slightly higher doses than they had done the day before. And the morning looked very similar. We reviewed the charts from the day before and made any updates as necessary. We discussed our intentions. We did our breath work, and then we went into the ceremony. And Olivia, how did you feel coming out of or about Sunday? Or what did you learn from Saturday going into Sunday, if there's anything different from what you just talked about?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the same. And like the things that I took away from Saturday, I really like my intention that day was really to integrate what I had learned from Saturday and to apply it on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
The one participant, I feel like finally did like let go. She did like have a moment where she was working through stuff while she was in double pedal, supine progressive. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just to, come at it from curiosity to help her even get into that position. Cause I don't think she really at the moment was just kind of like, I'm just going to like lay here in the fetal position. And I'm like, why don't we try something, And
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy that she was open to that. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to be able to like hold the space for her to like have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will say, like, coming in on Friday, I don't know why. I just thought this was going to be like a hunky dory thing. And then, the things that happened with Marin's experience kind of like really opened my eyes that like real work and things can come up. And,
Yeah, it's a big responsibility to be a facilitator. Mm-hmm.
yeah, like, I don't know. I just didn't think that was like a thing. And it was like totally a thing. And that's okay, And I was just actually very grateful that it happened. So I knew I could open myself up enough to hold that space for if anyone else did have that moment on Saturday or Sunday.
And honestly, one of the reasons I was okay with going a little bit higher on Friday was because I, as facilitators, it's important that we know how to handle, or that we can at least understand what it can be like for someone to go through that experience. This is not like doing a standard psychedelic trip. It's so different, so different. And while we could say that Marin didn't get what she wanted to do on Friday and things like that, the experience not only had profound value for you, Marin, but it had value for Olivia as a facilitator, right? Like these are the types of things that we can't learn unless we experience. Like, we can talk about it all day long. We can talk about, like, yeah, people can have hard trips, but until you're really there, you don't know what it means.
Yeah, and you don't really know what you think you know what you want, but you don't know what you need. So
we have this little narrow thing, and it's so ego driven about what we want right now.
Or even like what we thoughtfully think we need, but then the medicine just takes you where it's going to take you, and you just get what you're going to get. I mean, I think being open to getting derailed, being open to things like taking an unexpected route is like being flexible, essentially. Flexible and adaptable is like so important in this work. And also maybe important to kind of plant the seeds with people who are coming into this work as participants, like, what twists and turns this is going to take, and just being open and curious, and like welcoming the unexpected and welcoming things that feel unanticipated or even a little scary, because, there's all that being said, there's like a huge trust aspect to this work. And trust has been like, that's a big theme for me lately in my healing, is like trusting my body, trusting myself, trusting my intuition, and like working with people to like build up the trust in their own intuition, but co-creating spaces where there's profound trust and safety being intentionally woven into the space is like, I mean, it's what's going to make this successful,
I did want to ask one question about your guys' experiences on Friday that I never got to ask last week. At any point, did you have an experience where you felt like your visuals were connected to the exercise you were doing, or to the position you were doing, that your visuals were affected or being synergistically or synesthetically affected by the posture work?
I would say yes during my foot circles. So like, like ankle rolls essentially. I almost had like a, oh my God, what are those things called? Like a tornado aspect happen at one point. Then it stopped because I literally think I forgot how to make a circle. But I will say too, the breathing also changed it for me a lot too. So whether I was unconsciously like holding my breath, or like if I took like a deep inhale, like they definitely moved differently for sure.
Oh yeah, I guess I should say I did a changa ceremony after watching Marin's difficult transition from changa to mushrooms on Friday, and the fact that we want to use both changa and mushrooms at our full retreats. I was like, well, I need to do this same drop from changa to mushrooms and see what that's like. So I did a changa ceremony on Friday night before I did mushrooms on Saturday. Now I did much lower doses of mushrooms, so it wasn't fully comparable. But the important thing here is with the breath work. I did my breath work before the Changa ceremony, and it was the smoothest transition into the Changa space I'd experienced yet. Like, every other time I've smoked Changa, the way I describe it is it's like God punching you out of reality. It's like, oh, what the fuck? But this time was so smooth. Like, I felt it come on, and it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what it's like. It wasn't this like shocking, like what the and then doing the breath work on Saturday morning going into the mushroom ceremony, that was also I'm a huge fan of it. By the time you finish, like Olivia said, you're like already in the space, and it's just, yeah, it's amazing.
I do want to like maybe clarify, like I wouldn't have called it like a difficult transition, or like I wouldn't have even called my trip like a difficult trip. I would say it was profoundly uncomfortable at times, but I have had a difficult trip with a lot of like fear, and it was not that at all. And so
it was like confronting things rather than just like baseless paranoia and shit. Yeah.
Hard to re-experience, but still it didn't feel like I wished I wasn't having that experience. It just felt like, really uncomfortable. And I forgot what you guys were talking about before that, but I do have to hop off in like 5 minutes. So
yeah. Well, I think we're at a good point to start wrapping this up. Just maybe any closing thoughts. Olivia, do you have any closing thoughts?
Definitely worth trying, for sure. The whole experience. Because you're going to gain something out of it, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And it's just all encompassing, right? And there's just multiple factors sometimes when it comes into pain or chronic pain and things like that. And just be open-minded, for sure.
Yeah, I think... go ahead.
I see that one of you dropped a chat. I'm trying to look at it, but my computer is very slow.
Oh, that's
okay. I see it. I see it now. Okay.
Nothing profound. Yeah, I think, well, like just to kind of bring it full circle back to like our original conversation when we we're introducing ourselves about like chronic pain and how multidimensional it is. And I think the experience that we had over the weekend was like a really amazing illustration of just how chronic pain, it shows up in so many different dimensions, and you never really know like which one is the dimension that's most important to address at the moment. Oftentimes people will come into me and they're like, I know I should be going to a therapist, like a trauma therapist, and deal, and it's like there's all these different aspects, but like what do you do first? And I think kind of one of the beautiful things about psychedelics is like it can kind of take you kind of release a little bit of control to it, and it takes you where you need to go, whether it's like focusing more on the physical aspect, or maybe it's super emotional, or maybe there's some like metaphysical thing happening, and we're more of a spiritual communion with the medicine, or like connection with like something larger. And that's what you needed in that moment. And so it's almost like this is such a beautiful union of, I'm so obsessed with like the neurophysiology of the psychedelics and the whole neuroplastic, opportunity of psychedelics. And so, my world is very much like neuromuscular re-education and, retraining the nervous system and to let go of dysfunctional patterns and all that. And I think that this concept it has such potential to be so powerful and profound and healing, because gives you these like opportunities to delve into different aspects and kind of like letting the medicine guide you and like putting yourself in a situation where you're like open to what happens, whether that's the physical or the combination. Like we're talking about the supine groin, and like all of a sudden there's like all this energetic and emotional stuff happening. Meanwhile, I'm in this like very supported, helpful physical posture. So it's like all synergistically happening. Yeah, it's very cool.
Or it's just another dragonfly on a window.
I don't even. Fuck you, bro. I have seen many dragonflies since that day. I'm just saying.
I saw this gorgeous bright orange one yesterday, and it flew like right in front of my face. I was like, whoa.
That's great.
Perfect way to end.
I know it never will. It's fine.
That's a little inside joke, audience. I don't think we really have time to get into it. I don't think I have anything else for the. Oh, I'm just going to knock my camera around. I don't think I have anything else for the panel discussion here. Thank you both for joining me. I look forward to doing it again. Hopefully we will. If you're listening and you want to do something like this and you're still here, I think I would like to do another one in September. We'll see if that happens in September or not. I have no idea if that's possible. I can't remember what our schedules are like. So we are going to talk about organizing another one of those. And if you are interested, be sure to reach out. You can go to chronicpainmushroomretreats.com and go to the contact page and just ask about any training retreat opportunities. That's all I've got. Thanks for joining us.